My name is Ebenezer Sarfo. I'm a business strategist and a data specialist. And today on my channel, I have a special guest. His name is James Andrew in the UK. And we are happy to have you, James. James, how are you doing?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm very happy to be here. Sorry, I kept you waiting a few different sessions. We've both been busy, but no, it's great to finally catch up and be on. You've had a good caliber of guest, so I'm pretty humbled to be here as well.
Wow. All right. So James is the founder of Matador Software. It's a very bargain YouTube channel with specialty in data analysis. And James also works as an analyst in the healthcare industry. So I'll allow James to introduce himself to us so that we know who we are dealing with.
Yeah, so I'm James. I work full-time as a business intelligence analyst in the UK within healthcare. So it comes with industry challenges and good points and some things we're working on. So that's exciting. I also founded Matador Software, which is my own company, but currently I use that as a way to give people free content on YouTube primarily and LinkedIn. So I wouldn't have met you without that sort of that angle of things. And aside from that, I'm in Scotland in the UK. Got a young family, which makes sort of constantly upskilling very hard, but a good journey.
All right. So viewers, that's James, and we are happy to have him. He is a great industry guy, as well as off the industry, a very great YouTuber. So you check out his YouTube page, Matador Software, for anything Power BI, data analysis, SQL. He's great. I mean, his content is very great. I love the speed with which he comes up with content and the ease of teaching that he actually does on his YouTube channel. So kindly subscribe to the Matador Software channel. All right. So Andrew, I think that today our discussion would go around building a career in data in today's world. I mean, this is something that I believe everyone is now trying to become a data analyst or a data scientist in today's world, because it is rated as the coolest job or the sexiest job in the 21st century. But I mean, how does one start in the data space? I'm a newbie, I want to actually go into data. How do I start?
Yeah, and it's a very good question. I think what I would suggest, if you were to start from scratch, is to really get the fundamentals down. So you don't need to rush into applying for jobs, if you don't have that financial pressure, obviously. But if you can, Excel, SQL, and Power BI, maybe start with those, because they're not going anywhere. SQL's not going anywhere for a long time, neither is Excel. And some sort of visualization tool. It doesn't have to be Power BI, as we know. But yeah, that's what my honest advice would be. Don't rush, because I went from, Python to artificial intelligence, back to SQL, then to Excel, then back to Power BI. And I could have probably minimized my journey a lot. Although at the time, you just want to learn as much as possible. So I think the first step before considering jobs, to learn, just really get the fundamentals down and take your time and, enjoy it. If you make 5 minutes of progress in a day, you've learned something, fine. Close the laptop as you need to.
So as Andrew was saying, just take your time. It's a journey, so it's not about the speed in which you learn a tool, but I mean, you're going to go step by step. And he's just trying to tell us that if he was to redo it today, he would start probably with Excel, SQL, then any of the visualization tool, either Power BI, Tableau, or the not. But even before we talk about the tools, in the data space, what are the career options that are available to anybody starting up?
Yeah, so really you have three areas that are very and you know this, that are very popular, and that would be either a data or BI analyst, business intelligence analyst, a data engineer, or a data scientist is usually the three fields. But the interesting thing is there's a lot of overlap and crossover. And this is why I say learn the foundations, because you could go into a massive company, a huge corporation as a data analyst. You might actually just build reports in Power BI. But if you go to a really small company, they suddenly expect you to be actually doing data engineering work. You're building pipelines. They don't have the budget for these three different departments. So you're building pipelines, you're doing a bit of data science work with pandas and Python, and you have all the, the infrastructure and reporting responsibilities. So this is why I say learn the foundations, because everything grows so quickly and it changes in this industry. Those strong foundations will serve you well.
Wow. So like Andrew is advising, always start with the foundations, get to know what data really is and what analysis is, what is the science of data, what is the engineering of data, so that you pretty much have a fair idea of, you become like a person who understands the industry, and then learning the tools becomes just an add-on. Like Andrew is talking about, there is so much change in the data industry, especially with the tools, that starting off with the tools would definitely be a wrong way to start with it. So I agree with him 100% that start with the fundamentals, get a strong foundation, understand the industry, understand what data really is and what you are getting yourself into. And my next question would be, Andrew, what do you think the end goal of all that we do in data analysis or data science is? What should somebody be hoping to achieve, the purpose of it, so that it helps in understanding the industry?
Yeah, at the end of the day, you want to be able to leverage these technologies or tools to solve business problems. Basically, you want to have some form of output to the business, to executives, to profit, whatever that may be. But what you build needs to solve problems, and it needs to create some sort of actionable insight for people. So that's actually something that's quite comforting if you do start to get quite stressed and bogged down with tools. All you're actually doing is solving problems like you do every day. And the executives, we spoke earlier, they're lazy in some ways. They don't have a lot of time. So not lazy in a nasty way, but they don't have a lot of time.
Yeah.
Really phrased. But they don't care how you do things. They care that the problem gets solved. So it's sometimes helpful to remember that.
All right. I think I'll rehash on what Andrew just talked about, the fact and the fundamental of a data analyst, scientist, engineer is to ensure that you give that output for the end user to make his work easier. You should primarily see yourself as a business solutions person, just that the resource that you are using is data. Just like a human resource person uses the human resources to solve business problems, the finance person uses financials to solve the business problem. The head of engineering uses engineering to solve business problems. The data analyst or the data scientist or the business analyst is trying to solve a business problem with a tool, a resource called data. So all that businesses are interested in at the end of the day, like James said, is that you need to get them results, which could be profitability, could be increase in sales. That is, the business objective always comes first. So if you are going into data and you have this at the back of your mind, that I'm here to solve problems for businesses, you'd always come top. And that is what would distinguish you from others in the field. So James, after doing this, learning the fundamentals, what is the next approach that a person could go through?
Yeah, and I guess it depends how long you want to spend on the fundamentals as well. It could be a long time. But no, I think after that point, what I would be doing is starting to look at maybe these visualization tools, or you've got sites like HackerRank. Basically what I'm saying is I would start to try and solve my own problems personally, or I might have a use case. A lot of people say to me, James, hey, I work maybe as an engineer. How do I become a data analyst? Well, in your current role, why don't you use these technologies to solve problems? And you've already got demonstrable experience. So I think you need to start looking, whether it's challenges, real business use cases, how you can start to put these into practice. And by doing that, you go into Power BI, maybe you're trying to solve something or get a visualization and you get stuck. So by iteration, you end up in the Microsoft forums for 4 hours on Stack Overflow, whatever that may be, and you then improve. So it's almost like you're topping up your knowledge at that point and you're becoming a lot stronger in sort of real issues, because you can learn the foundations all day long, but there's going to be a pattern of things that go wrong when you use these things in an enterprise environment.
Wow. So, like James is saying, I believe that where you are, start from where you are after learning the fundamentals. If you're an engineer, there's data in engineering. Start solving engineering problems with the data and help your department. That is how you actually get better, because it's all about business solutions. And you should have at the back of your mind that you just want to solve business problems. Once you have a heart for that, it will become intuitive for you to actually metamorphosize into data analysis, because wherever you may be, there is data available, whether you're an HR person, whether you're a finance guy. I've interviewed a lot of accountants who have become data analysts by just probing the financial data and helping management make decisions out of it. So after understanding the fundamentals, like James said, is to start looking for problems to solve. And that is starting from where you are. That is the best advice anyone can give you. Don't look too far. Wherever you are, there might be data. You may be a salesperson and you start building data analysis on your sales. It could be as simple as Excel, and then you actually grow from there. So I believe these 2 points start with understanding the fundamentals and then solving problems where you are. So, James, I mean, after the person has now learned the foundation, solving problems with the area that the person finds themselves, the next question would be, what tools do I start with? Which tools do I start learning to become a data analyst?
Yeah, I think obviously vitally important, and I think we would recommend Power BI usually in terms of your reporting. There's a few reasons for that. Number one, it's got very good links in the Microsoft ecosystem. So if you're familiar with Excel, things like maybe even SQL, or you can learn SQL Server, it's very strong. And nowadays we're always in an environment where we're looking to automate tasks. So we have Power Automate and what we call the Power Platform. You can even go ahead and make a ticketing app in Power Apps. Now that might be way ahead of the curve, but it's important to remember these things. So I would say start with Power BI, and it's, there's less of a learning curve for basic Power BI before we get into other things like DAX or Power Query.
Wow. All right. So like James is saying, start with Power BI because I've actually done a video on 5 reasons why you need to learn Power BI and why you can check on my YouTube channel to get that. It's very, very necessary. I'd also add, you can start with Excel. At the end of the day, you are solving business problems. So once the problem is solved, like James said, they do not care what way or which method that you used. However, the reason why Power BI will come top is the enterprise version, because Excel makes it very hard to actually visualize your report based on the analysis that you've done. And Power BI is also free, so it's a good way to start. More importantly, there's a very much tons of help online to actually help you get started. My channel is one, Matador Software is one. So start where it's easy. And there's also a community out there that can always help you get one problem solved. So it's a good place to start. And then you graduate into the hard-end programming stuff with R or Python, where you do. And One thing I always tell people is that I started learning Power BI in 2016 in the early days, and I've seen it morph into something else. And I believe it's just about starting. And the BI team and the product team in Microsoft only tells us they're about starting. So we can only hope that in the future they may have almost all that R and Python does already in Power BI, especially with how great the DAX engine is. That's the Vertipack engine. So we can only hope for the best. So Power BI is a great place to start. And if you know what Microsoft does in any field that they're going to, like what they did to spreadsheets, what they did to word processors with Microsoft Word, what they did with presentations with PowerPoint, I believe they do the same with the Power Apps package in the data world. It's just a matter of time. They are going to actually capture the data world. So it's good to start with that and go with the flow. All right. So now let's narrow down to Power BI. I've actually learned the foundations of data. I've perhaps gotten a course on Coursera or EDX to learn about the foundations of data. I've started solving problems in my own area with the tools like Excel and Power BI. But how do I start learning Power BI, for instance? And where do I turn to? Because there are dozens of learning materials out there. Would you recommend a paid course? How do I get to learn Power BI?
Yeah, I guess my approach is we'll put paid courses aside for now. I would say your best place to start is something like go to Google, Microsoft documentation, and follow what we're taught from Microsoft. From there, maybe you can go ahead and start playing around, and I think we would agree that that's the best way you learn, because you come up with the issues and you learn to independently go and research things. But I would start there, and then you can gravitate into things like YouTube courses. But if you're going to follow certain YouTube tutorials, you need to know the Power BI best practices yourself, maybe from Microsoft. So start there. And I would recommend paid courses way down the line when you're advanced and you need to learn something more specific, maybe.
Wow. Okay. So from James, what you need to do is to first go to the source, which is the documentation. I believe James has what in engineering we would call from first principles idea of always going back to the source.
Yeah.
Get to the first principles of it's. Once you're learning Power BI or any tool that you're learning, go to the actual source, the developers, to get the documentation around it. Learn from them first, because they will give you the hardcore tool understanding and what it can do without any shortcuts. And then you get a fair idea with that. Personally, I started with the Microsoft team. At the time, they had a course on EDX that they were teaching how to actually go by the Power BI tool itself, straight with Will Thompson teaching it. And it was very great resource back then. But like James said, it's good that you go back to the documentation, start from the scratch, understand it, and then you can now go around shopping for fancy things. Then later, after you've gotten yourself something, then you can go for a paid course for specifics. Let's say you want to learn the DAX language, you go in there and learn. All right. So with that, how do I become better? Like if I want to become an expert in, let's say, a Power BI tool, how do I become an expert?
Yeah, practice. To put it simply, practice. Make projects. I do think there's a place for these data challenges because it excels your learning experience. And there are things like, you can do boot camps, YouTube, whatever that may be, but it really all comes down to your own practice. Because if I need to fix an issue, maybe at the time I don't know that I even need DAX to do this. Maybe I need a calculate function. Well, I'm going to find that out myself. And I think that's how you do become an expert, because every day we, in a professional situation, we probably spend time on Google trying to figure something out, or we see some. I watch your channel and I think, right, that is a cool design concept. I'm going to go away and research that. But all these foundations start with doing things for yourself in the tool, and there's no shortcut. You just have to spend hours in the tool. And by then you naturally become an expert because you learn where to look, what's actually correct. You know the principles, and I think your growth gets exponential from there. And then specific things like DAX, you just have to put in the time. You might need to go back to books like Definitive Guide and go from there. But it just all stems from the hours you put in, I think, and how effective they are.
Wow. So, I think from my engagement with all aspects, no one runs away from practice. There's no other way than to practice. You'd be surprised how much they also practice just like any other person. That's how they become good at what they do. So, like James has said, practice, practice, practice. Top 3 things to become an expert in anything. Practice. There's no other way out. And so I believe that what you need to do is always to practice. Then the next thing that somebody would say is that now I've become good at it. How do I get a job? Like, how do I land a job as a data analyst?
Yes, so it's, these things have many variables, because I know let's say we're all based in different spots. So in the UK, actually, I think there's a lot of opportunity. And I did read our government put out a study that said data analysts, scientists, and engineer are all within the top 10 most wanted careers right now. And I don't mean most wanted from the applicant's perspective. I mean from the employers. They're in demand. But the skills, again, the great thing about living in 2022 or 2016 when you learned is you can forge the path yourself. But in other areas, it can be very congested. I have a lot of connections from India, and I think they do have a problem with people tend to want years of experience, which I don't think is hugely necessary. You don't need 5 years for an entry-level data analyst. No. So what I would suggest is the best way for me is having a sort of mechanism to bring people to you. So for me, I decided to start doing things on YouTube. And I'm naturally actually quite a shy person. I'm an introvert. But I realized I didn't want to necessarily get a job because I had that side covered. But I thought, well, how am I going to make my network, or say I spend 20 minutes on LinkedIn a day, how do I make that a place where I can curate it so that I can automatically learn? So I open my phone in the morning, suddenly I get an article from Ebenezer, something from Leon Gordon, whoever that may be, and you can learn that way. So my opinion, to get a job, the best way is to draw people into you. So that could be a portfolio, it could be a YouTube channel, it could be a website, it could be NoviPro, it could be LinkedIn. And they're pretty solid. If you're applying for jobs, I think you need to be able to stand out, obviously. So I've seen people, and I think this is quite creative. You can create a resume dashboard in Power BI. And like we said, but a key area, and I think this is the key problem. Many people say, well, my interview's asking me when I solved issues with data, but I've never had a data job. And our response would be, well, if you work on an oil rig and you're an engineer and you want to transition to data, well, you're working with millions of rows of data daily.
Yeah.
So learn to harness it, educate your team, maybe speak to the boss and say, hey, can we get some pro licenses, and go from there. And then when you go into an interview, actually, that really hands-on experience is going to serve you really well. And you showed initiative, which is something you need to do as a data analyst. Go.
That is great. So it's very important that, like James said, you would need to actually look at the space that we are in and draw people to you. Because like people like Armand and very many people that we know in the space have built certain names for themselves in the space by generally every time building dashboards or reports on in Power BI and then asking people to come to them So based on that, you are able to actually get a certain link network where people can easily always come to you when they need you, because most recruiters are looking for that. But one advice that James said is that don't actually listen to the recruiter's request for the number of years of experience, because very few data analysts have that number of years in experience. Once you can give proof of concept of what you've done, because most of the recruiters don't even know what they are looking. They've just gone on Google and searched for certain words just for recruitment's sake, just to look like something on paper. But in reality, what you may be doing may be far less. So build a certain profile on LinkedIn and join the community, like James said, and make yourself out there, because there are a lot of jobs or there's a lot of demand for Power BI developers as well as other data analysts. And
Yeah.
I think you can add on.
That's a really good point, Ebenezer. Don't listen to the years of experience, because in certain technologies I've seen jobs advertised, and I'm not looking for a job, and just by virtue of me regularly posting, it's not a brag because I don't respond to them, but I maybe get 3 recruiters or more a week ask me if I want a job or if I want to go to an interview. But I've looked at some of the descriptions and I wouldn't even match what they said. But people think if you're producing content, you're upskilling, you're up to date on the technology, so you suddenly get branded an expert. Now, we maybe don't even think of ourselves as experts, but people view that you know what you're doing, and suddenly all those metrics get thrown out the window. So that's why I say, if you get people to come to you, you get a name and a space, and hey, that's more powerful than anything. And it's almost like automating a process, which we love. We're naturally lazy people as analysts. So if we can automate people coming to us, hey, even better.
Wow. I mean, that's a great advice that James just gave. So if you're looking for a job, I mean, there are tons of jobs. I think there is kindly Google Jobs also, that you can actually look on for remote jobs on Google. There are a lot of tons of jobs for Power BI and remote jobs. So if you may be in India and still looking for a job, you could get a remote job being in India. Perhaps India may not be a matured market for the business intelligence. However, if you are able to look for a remote job, who knows, wherever you may be, today the world is just a small place. Like James said, I personally also get that feel. I see a lot of job interviews and job descriptions that they are calling out for me, but I'm not looking for a job. So it's sometimes funny how those job descriptions, I may not even match based on the description they are giving out there, but they are still calling out for you because they know you are abreast with the content. So, I mean, that's a good way to advertise yourself. It's a small place, it's a great network, and you start from somewhere, and you'll be surprised how incrementally you may grow into something great. So, I mean, thank you very much, James, for the time, especially on this session on careers in data and how we can actually start to land a job. And any last words for any data analysts today?
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure. I think the community is great, and it's one of the best sort of professional communities I've come across. So leverage it. But I don't mean leverage it in the sense that you connect with someone and say, hey, have you got a job? That's the wrong way to do things. And unfortunately, I'm sure you may have had that message, Ebenezer. But it's about being able to, you can speak to anyone. And in this day and age, you can learn anything from, and sometimes I get overwhelmed because I think in the morning, do I want to go and learn on a blog today or YouTube or LinkedIn? I could go on Ebenezer's channel, or there's a SQL blog I want to read. But the great thing is there's so much freedom. So you need to figure out a way to just curate your life so that you can get this sort of information. And if you're persistent and you draw people to you and you learn, you'll grow. I would say the last thing, you may be in a position now where you're constantly learning. Well, me and Ebenezer spoke about it. That doesn't change. I know people who get up 2 hours every morning before their BI day job or their day-to-day job, and they learn. So just keep learning. If you knew, when I was first learning the technology after a day job in the oil and gas industry, I went home and learned, with a young child. I said to myself, hey, I've learned 2 things that I didn't know yesterday, so I'm doing all right. And I think just don't put too much pressure on yourself. You'll get there.
Wow. That's a great advice for anyone starting the data career, that learn. And the second thing I've picked here is practice. So learn, practice. Don't put too much pressure on yourself. Go with the flow. And like you said, the BI community is one of the loveliest community I've seen. Like, everyone is willing to share so much. I've learned so much from the BI community over the years that I've been there. So great having you, Andrew. Andrew and I would have a sequel to this interview, and we are going to talk more on the May updates in Power BI and the new trends. So thank you for listening and viewing us today, and catch you same time next week for the sequel to this, which looks at Power BI's updates in May and the current trends in Power BI. Have a great stay, and remember to subscribe to our channel, Matador Software and Ebenezer Sarfo. See you. Bye.